Welcome to our tutorial on edit modes. There's 4 edit modes available to you in Pro Tools. From the beginning to the end of your session, you'll find yourself switching between modes because each is particularly suited for certain types of editing. The edit tools function in different ways depending on which edit mode you're in. The edit modes are located in the upper left-hand corner of the edit window, first as Slip, Shuffle, Spot, and Grid. Each has its own color. In Shuffle mode, your regions move like magnets. If you use the grabber to drag a region to another place, it'll snap to the edge of the nearest region. All the regions that come after it are automatically shuffled to the right. This is useful when trimming because your adjacent regions will snap to remain adjacent so that there's no gaps. If you're using the grabber to change the order of regions, they'll stay stuck together without any gaps in them too, so you don't need to worry about repositioning. If you're dragging in regions from the regions list with the grabber, same thing. They'll snap to the nearest region, and everything next to it will be automatically shuffled to the right. Let's just do a little more demonstrating of how this one works. F1 is your shortcut key for shuffle mode. Now let's move on to the next mode. Next, we're going to take a look at spot mode. F2 is your shortcut key for spot mode. Spot mode is perfect for when you want to place regions at precise numerical locations. For example, when you're placing or spotting effects for a video project. That's where the word spotting comes from. When you use the grabber or trimmer tools, the spot dialog window will open. The first field on top is the time scale value drop-down menu. I select which kind of units or time scale I'd like to spot to. In the start field, I enter my precise numerical positioning. In bars and beats, I can even go down to the 100th of a beat. I can also choose to position by the end location. Let me change to minutes and seconds. This is a little easier to look at. Use the left and right arrow keys to toggle between the minutes, seconds, and hundredths. The up and down arrows increment my value. I'm going to enter a value here. When I'm done, I'll press OK. And as you can see, my object has moved. Trim tool works in a similar way. When I click on a region with the Trim tool activated, the Spot dialog window opens. Pro Tools intelligently knew that I wanted to modify the end because it did give me a left-pointing square bracket at the end, and it dropped me right in the end field. Instead of ending at 54 seconds, I'm going to change it to, let's go down, 53. And as you can see, my region is now trimmed. Okay, let's explore our next mode, Slip mode. Shortcut is F3. In Slip mode, we can freely drag regions without any type of adjustments made from Pro Tools. This is particularly good if you need to make adjustments at a very close level, like down at the sample level. Same thing with the trimmer tool, we can trim to exactly where we want. Next, we're going to look at the last mode, Grid mode, and that is activated with the shortcut of F4. This is kind of like the snap to grid mode in a graphics program. In grid mode, all of your edit tools will drop you to the nearest time increment on your grid. Let's talk a little about how grids work in Pro Tools. Pro Tools has got 3 time-based rulers, bars and beats, minutes and seconds, and samples. You can choose to see the grid in any of these modes. The current grid value is displayed at this drop-down menu. Here I've got 10,000 samples selected, but I can go down as small as 1 sample. I can also change my units. Here I have an 1/8 note selected for my grid value. I can change that to a 1/4 note, or a 1/2 note, or even a bar. And as you see, my grid adjusts accordingly. I can set it in minutes and seconds as well, and choose the type of time increment. 500 milliseconds or half a second, 100 millisecond, 10 millisecond, or even down to 1 millisecond. That would be useful if you were editing very, very up close, but let's go down to 500 milliseconds because I won't be up so close. Now let's enable the viewing of the grid through Setup, Preferences. Let's drag this over, Display, enable Draw Grids in Edit window. Click OK. And we're going to see our grids here in the units that we've specified to the increment we've specified. We're going to zoom in a little bit, click and drag over the section we want to zoom to the full width of the edit window. Just get over a little bit here. Let's activate our grid lines. Display. Draw grids in edit window. Here are grid lines. Our grid value is set as an 1/8 note. And as you can see here, we've got a grid line every half beat here, or every eighth note. Let's change our grid value to a quarter note, and our grid lines adjust accordingly. Now when we try to grab and move a region, we can only take it to the grid line. We can't drag it in between the grid lines. Same thing if we try to trim it. It only lets me trim to an exact increment. Same thing if I want to drag in a region from the regions list. Single click on these double chevrons in the lower right hand corner to open the regions list. Now let's grab and drag. And as you can see, I can only drop it at an increment value on my grid. I can't drop it in between. Let's undo that. Grid mode is handy for drawing MIDI notes as well because it quantizes them for you. Just resize so I can see what's going on a little better. Let's take a look at this MIDI track in Notes view. I need a little bit more. Okay, this looks better. Now I can see what I'm doing. Let's increase the vertical size of our track. Now we activate the pencil tool. And all I've got to do is click, and my notes will drop in quantized to the exact length of a beat. This is really handy if I need my notes to be the length of the beat. Grid mode is also handy for automation. Let's just take a look at my percussion track. This is one case where grid mode would be particularly useful because it lets me line up my percussion exactly on the beat. I've got my audio waveform dimmed out in the background. Now let's switch to the grabber so we can drop in some breakpoints. As you can see, I can only drop them at the exact increment values on my grid. This allows me to make some precise and metronomical changes in my volume. Let's go back to waveform view. Okay. Let's take a look at our trumpet track. I want to zoom out a little bit to get a better view. You can temporarily suspend grid mode by holding down the Control key while you trim. The grid mode has two types of options. We've got absolute grid and relative grid. In absolute grid, we trim, grab, drop, and draw on the exact value of the increment. In relative grid mode, you make your adjustments using the grid value you've selected, but it's against your region rather than against a superimposed grid. This would be useful for making adjustments to sections that don't exactly follow your grid, but that do require adjustments according to some precise ruler. As you see here, I've just shortened this bit by exactly one beat. It doesn't drop on the beat line, but it does shorten by the exact amount I've specified. Let's go back to absolute grid. And I hope you enjoyed this review of edit modes in Pro Tools.